Thank you for auditing Professor Skye's Record Review, the only first listen new music review show hosted by a French professor while his family is asleep upstairs. And while they sleep, I'm going to be discussing the new album Quickies by the Magnetic Fields. And as I like to do at the beginning of all my videos, it's going to be a section which I'm thinking about calling Professor Skye Professes His Ignorance. The Magnetic Fields are giant in indie music and indie rock and roll of the last 20 years, but I have never really listened to them. I first knew about them through a mixtape in the late 90s that my friend Joe Gargarlinsky gave me, and there was one song on there, Pretty Girl in Her Underwear, I think is what it was called. And I liked it, and I thought it was cool, but like the next song on the mixtape was Smog, and so I went on to like love Smog and see them in concert and become my favorite band. And everything else on that mixtape kind of faded away. But you know, the Magnetic Fields have been around a lot. I've seen the cover of their album 69 Love Songs hundreds of times. I recognize them. If you play me a song, I can say, oh, that's Magnetic Fields. But this is the first time, and part of the reason I do this show is to force myself to do this. This is the first time I've really sat down and tried to think, what are the magnetic fields? Or a better question might be, who is the magnetic fields? It is just one person with other collaborators, Stephen Merritt. At the end of the video, I'm going to tell you how my entire life is totally dependent on the fact that I almost went to the same high school as Stephen Merritt. So I'll tell you that at the end because it's a little bit of an indulgent story, but also the nature of that high school, I believe, informs a lot about the music of Stephen Merritt. And in order to understand him, you have to understand that high school. But I'm not ready to go there yet. So now we've established what my ignorance is. I am going to pose the question that will be the sort of through line through this entire video. Can there be too much wit? I actually just finished grading, and one of my classes, I had the students read Henry Bergson, who writes about the nature of laughter and comedy, and he very correctly observed that emotion is sort of the natural enemy of comedy. That like when you feel and when you can be empathetic, you sort of stop laughing at things. And in another way, you know, wit and humor is the domain of intelligence. Like you have to have a certain intelligence to find things funny. So then, is the opposite true as well? Is wit the enemy of emotion? If we listen to music often to feel things and to have resonant emotion, if music is super funny or even super witty, like, what do we lose? Is it worth listening to? Is that why we listen to music? And this album, Quickies, is very funny. More importantly, it's very witty. I would divide those two by saying, you know, wit is humor, which is mostly clever. It's mostly in the brain, where you go, I understand that ironic twist. Is this album too much wit? Does it bear repeat listenings? Does it have emotional resonance? I believe it all does, but it's right on the line. Now, in my brief research about magnetic fields, I did about 5 minutes. I learned that I almost went to the same high school as him, and I learned that he spent much of his life in Massachusetts. And it actually works because when I was listening to this album, I realized there's two great giants of underground music that came from Massachusetts, that this album is a cross between. The first of which, I can't believe this is the second time in a month I'm mentioning this band, is AC. A stands for anal, C stands for the worst word you can use when referring to female genitalia. And the thing about this band is, much like the album Quickies, which has it's like a 45-minute album, but there's like 26 songs, there's a lot of songs on it. This is a track listing of an AC album, okay? And each one of them, it's like basically death metal. He just screams something. It's some guy named Seth, I think he's dead now. They just scream the title of the song. And all of the titles are something very funny and very, very edgy. Jack Kevorkian is cool. Value Jet. You've got no friends. You own a store. You got date raped. You're a cop. Pottery is gay. Wind chimes are gay. Eazy-E got AIDS from Freddie Mercury. I ate your horse. Your kid committed suicide because you suck. Okay, very aggressive, angry stuff. But the thing was, why did I buy these? Well, I'm from Massachusetts. I'm an edgelord. This music is interesting. It's not even really music, but like the joy of an AC album is getting it and just reading all of the titles. And once you've read the titles, you understand the song. You don't even need to listen to, and I would actually actively suggest you don't listen to these CDs. They're basically one-joke ideas. And in some ways, that's what this album Quickies is about. A track like I Wish I Were in a Biker Gang. Like, I've given you the title. You can basically extrapolate most of what it is. But that's not quite fair. I would actually say that this album is a combination between AC and Jonathan Richman, lead singer of Modern Lovers, but it's not the Modern Lovers that this reminds me of. Modern Lovers also has a very witty, Jonathan Richman has a very witty style. Often his songs have titles, and those titles tell you something, and you know what they're going to say. But the thing that he does, that AC doesn't do, is he manages to get a lot of human truths. He uses the lightness and the goofiness of comedy to transmit ideas that are often very deep. And he does it in a way where you're sort of done listening to it and you go, oh, that was kind of nice, that was kind of light. But really what you've experienced is something very profound. And also, musically, Jonathan Richman is very simple. It's just him singing, a guitar, and a drum. There's a stylistic simplicity and consistency which in some ways defeats rock and roll critics, which I'm not. But it kind of defeats music critics because you just go, well, it's charming, but where's the production? Where's the layering? Why is it just some guy who's just singing about rooming house on Venice Beach? Or I was dancing in the lesbian bar. Seriously, is I Was Dancing at a Lesbian Bar an AC song, a Jonathan Richman song, or a Magnetic Fields song? So I would say if we could put these two together, we'd start to get the idea of what exactly magnetic fields are like. I'm just placing that there so it looks cool. Now that said, this album is probably, well, it's definitely better than AC, and I would put it on par with I, Jonathan, or any of the great Jonathan Richman albums, which is quite a compliment. I'm going to talk about it, and the way I'm going to do it, first of all, just musically, is very simple. It's very intentionally simple. There's a lot of auto harp, which is like this little machine, almost like a toy, which makes very simple music. There's guitar, some very simple piano, sometimes a Celeste piano, sometimes a toy piano. The music choices, the instrument choices, actually make it feel even more like kind of a gag album, like a joke. Like, is he really serious about this? And as always, the great question that Robert Heinlein put forth in his book, The Moon is a Harsh Mistress, all comedy can be divided into that's a funny one time or that's a funny all the time. So is this just you hear it once, you get the joke right here, you get the joke, and then you move on? Or has he done what Jonathan Richman does, where he makes a joke and you laugh, but then when it gets at something deeper, you love it enough that you keep listening? Again, there's actually, let me get the actual number here. If I'm a music critic, I should know how many songs are on this album. There's 28 songs, and I've divided them into some rough categories. I'm a professor, I'm an academic. That's what we like to do. We like to divide things. So I divide them into several themes. Number one is bourgeois ennui. It seems as though he's a middle-aged man and he's lived an interesting life, and there's a huge theme throughout this entire album about the boredom of living a good middle-class standard life and a sort of longing for a more chaotic, youthful life. There's songs of ironic revolution, like Blasphemy and Anarchy, where I say it's ironic revolution because he's not saying let's burn down the White House, but he's saying things with a kind of cool, sarcastic distance. Strange Love is the third theme. There's a lot of songs about strange love. That song I talked to you about like he talks about beautiful woman in underwear, if anything's sexier, I don't care, and then says a beautiful boy in his underwear. And I remember as a slightly homophobic young man who has grown throughout the years, I remember being like, ooh, this doesn't sound like a gay song. Those are my actual words. So he writes a lot about sexuality. His sexuality seems like he writes about pansexuality. I don't even know how, I don't know enough about him to know how he identifies, but I know that he writes about sexuality in a way where you can't pin it one way or the other. Which, of course, that doesn't make it strange. What makes the love strange on this album, I'll get to soon. And then finally, I would put the last category as sort of a miscellaneous Stephen's Strange Life, where he just sort of sings about his life. And as always, I don't have a script, I have notes. You see, there's my categories. I put them right there. I'm all prepared today. I'm excited. I was actually so excited to review this album, I had trouble getting to sleep last night. So let's kind of begin here, kind of go through track by track in my Pink Citroën and talk about what's happening in this album. The first track, Castles of America, introduces the concept. It's a 35-second song. He sort of name drops a couple of his friends. This is Stephen's Strange Life. Like, he just sort of came up with a weird song and just put it forth. And then we get to track number 2, Biggest Tits in History. This is where you start to wonder, what is this album? Can something be too witty? You see, it's a joke. It's about tufted tit mice. Tits are actually a class of birds. And so he's saying that this woman has the biggest tits in history. Okay, this could be just stupid. And musically, it sounds like it's trying to be like an old 60s, bad, semi-psychedelic, semi-folky song. But lyrically, I think this is not trying to be like AC. I think this is trying to be like AC/DC. I think my theory is that Stephen Merritt was just like, because they always do bad innuendo, like, he's got the biggest bows of them all, like the biggest hits in history, but I'm not singing about breasts, I'm singing about birds. But then he takes it to such an absurd extent, to the point where she studies biology. Her mother also worked in biology and also bred tits. And this whole thing, like working for the government, that it feels to me like a funny joke that hints at something better. And then we get to track 3, maybe my highlight on the album, a song of ironic revolution, The Day the Politicians Died. Billions laughed and no one cried the day the politicians died. And a huge current about the humor in this album is, unlike Jonathan Richman, it's a very dark humor. All throughout, there's just death and darkness and evil everywhere on this album. And I don't know enough about Stephen Merritt to know what he's getting at here. But this is just a very well-written song, very short, a couple minutes, very witty. And I think it expresses a lot of how we feel. It's not partisan. It's not the day the Republicans died or the day the Democrats died. It's just the day the politicians died, everyone was happy. And then let's eat some priests. So it's a really great song. And I believe it's much more in the Jonathan Richman category, where you don't just read the title, you want to listen to the song. I actually listened to it 3 times in a row the first time I heard it, so that's a good sign. The next track is called Castle Down a Dirt Road, and this is where where the album loses a little bit of its cohesion, because this and the first track about castles are in that category of sort of Stephen's Strange Life, sort of miscellaneous, and they don't fit to me, like they're too vague. I don't know what they're actually singing about. There's something about like rebelling against your parents. Musically, it actually, in that way, it made me think of They Might Be Giants. Like, how They Might Be Giants are singing, and they often, like Birdhouse in Your Soul, like their most famous song, you sort of get what they're saying, but you couldn't actually explain what all the words mean or how they all fit together. That's where this is. The next track, Bathroom Quickie, is the introduction of Strange Love to this album. Ricky, I want a bathroom quickie. I want you to get me sticky. I don't know. I suppose he wants to have sex in a bathroom with someone named Ricky. Is this hot? Is it even erotic or homoerotic? I don't know. It's funny. I like it. It's a very quick song, and it's this playfulness of this album. The next track, My Stupid Boyfriend, continues on this theme of strange love. This is cool though because it's taken from this position of going through a lot of the tropes of, you know, War of the Roses, man versus woman, he said, she said, breakup style songs. But it sort of like goes back and forth where they say, you know, my stupid boyfriend does this, my stupid girlfriend does that. Then one point, he says, my stupid boyfriend does this, and she says, oh, I should mention, there's a female singer who sings most of this album. I remember from the credits, it's Shirley something. So it's nice because his voice is super low and her voice is pretty high, so it creates a good dynamic. So you're not just always down here for the whole album. So in this sort of back of the fourth War of the Sexes style song, they then mention that, well, just hopefully my boyfriend will die, my girlfriend will die, and then you can be my stupid boyfriend. And again, this is a joke, but it's a deeper joke because the idea is that we just sort of replace our past partners and we make the same mistakes. And my boyfriend is so stupid. And then if he dies, then you can be my stupid boyfriend. It's really quite good. Love Gone Wrong continues this sort of three-part strange love part in the middle of this album. It sounds to me almost like a Guns N' Roses song for some reason. His just super bass voice, just really low, and it gets weird. Starts about talking like eating penises. You know, it gets pretty strange here. A little more AC territory. His singing does remind me a lot of MGR from the Swans. I would love to have them in the room together, just together. The next track, Favorite Bar. This is Steven's Strange World. He seems like an alcoholic, or he seems like he drinks a lot. I don't know. They talk about a lot about drinking on this album. This is the most Jonathan Richman song, even though Jonathan Richman is straight edge, so he wouldn't sing about a bar. But it seems like it's a very specific tale of a very specific bar where he goes and the bartender speaks German and he can wear lipstick and be okay. And there's a beautiful harmony between a female singer and him, between Shirley and him. Very specific. This is great. It's a charming, wonderful song about the comfort that you feel in a third place. Not your home, not your work, the third place of a bar. Kill a Man a Week is a revolution song saying don't turn the other cheek, very quick. Kraftwerk and a Blackout is much like the songs about castles where you don't really know what they're talking about. I don't feel like it really fits on this album that well, even though I like the track. When She Plays the Toy Piano is in the miscellaneous category as well. It's abstract, it's psychedelic, there's like violin and ukulele, so I put the ukulele back there. Actually, I'd put this in the category of bourgeois ennui, because it's talking about this girl who, what's the line here? When she's playing toy piano, she is ransoming her youth. And this song, which is a great song, it's really grown on me quite a bit. It's about this need that this woman will eventually have, where she's playing a toy piano now, but she'll eventually have to grow up and get married and have a job. And the loss that's felt, the middle-age loss of youth, is a painful feeling. And so that's this theme. Let's Make a Death Pact is those words. I've Got a Date with Jesus is part of this blasphemous theme. So, you know, there's the anarchist theme and the sort of blasphemous theme. It's like a love song basically about dating Jesus. And it's funny. That's just it. Like, it's funny. I don't know if it's great. Come Shake Her Life is like a traditional song. So this is like a traditional religious song. So this whole kind of undercurrent of anti-religiosity, but maybe this is showing some kind of like deference to the history of faith and its relationship to music. I don't know. I Want to Join a Biker Gang is the next two tracks. I Want to Join a Biker Gang and Rock and Roll Guy are the most bourgeois ennui of the whole album. I Want to Join a Biker Gang is talking about how I want to join a biker gang, I want to be in a gangbang, I like my empty life, but dang. So the concept that whatever life he's living now is empty and he wants to have something exciting and dangerous. And Rock and Roll Guy is fantasizing about being with a guy who has no future. Just someone who can sleep in a van. And you know, like I can relate to that, you know, as a middle-aged guy myself, you relate to this, you know, like sometimes you'll just be walking and you just see somebody who's just a complete loser and just has nothing in their life. And very clearly, like, just, and you like long to be like them. You know, like I've got nice speakers and bookshelves filled with books and all that, but it's like, wouldn't I trade that to be like that loser dude down at the cafe? And I wouldn't, but that kind of fantasy is very human, and he's able to do it in a way that's very funny. So again, much more on the Jonathan Richman side of things, because he's getting at human truths through comedy. You've Got a Friend in Beelzebub. So the Church of Satan is like a real thing, and the thing about the Church of Satan is that it's like intentionally not about Satan. It's sort of anti-religion. So most of the people who are in the Church of Satan don't believe in anything, and they support Satan just to try to point out the hypocrisy of the world and the way that we talk about religious tolerance but don't actually have it. So this is like a Christian rock song for Satanists, but not for people who actually like believe in Satan and sacrifice chickens and stuff. It's like an inverted joke. That's like, you've got a friend in Jesus, you've got a friend in Beelzebub. It goes quite well with I Got a Date with Jesus. And it's a pretty good example. This song is like the Church of Satan itself, right? Like I am not a fan of Satanists. I don't believe in evil or the Prince of Lies. But the fact that there's a group out there that's using comedy and humor to sort of fight the system, to be revolutionary, to be blasphemous, is actually in the great tradition that started in the Enlightenment. So the Church of Satan is good, and I can say that as a Christian. It's a confusing world, but that's very much how this song makes me feel. Let's Get Drunk and Divorced. This is a great strange love song. It's talking about how he married some guy and wants to divorce him, and he got married when he was drunk and he's not. Sort of a combination between Stephen's Strange Life and Strange Love. He does rhyme borscht with divorced. And earlier in the album, he used the word growed and showed. Like he uses these words that are a little bit grammatically off. And that's very much like Jonathan Richman as well, where like there's a playfulness in the rhyme scheme where you rhyme something with a word that you know doesn't exist and you do it just to be funny. Best Cup of Coffee in Tennessee is like a weird sort of fake love song about marrying a waitress. I don't know. When the Brat Upstairs Got a Drum Set, sort of domestic themes. This might be bourgeois ennui as well, because the idea of a young person playing drums, you know, this little girl gets a drum set, how he's upset. But obviously he's a musician, so he should like it. Price You Pay is an ironic anti-dancing song. And then we get to the best track on the album, The Boy in the Corner. This is the simplest track on the album. It's just a guitar and his voice. And it's really sad. And it's about him being the boy in the corner. I'll play it for you for a second in case you ever want to listen to The Magnetic Fields.
Where's the boy in the corner, scribbling in my little book?
And it goes on to talk about the story of how he was a boy in a corner and someone else was the flashy kid, and then he gets struck by lightning and dies. And I listened to this with my kids yesterday. I'm like, what's it about? And they're like, well, I think it's about like, you know, even though you're like in the corner, some people just, you know, no one pays attention to you and everyone pays attention to the popular kids and you think that it matters, but then you can just die and everyone's just still paying attention to the popular kids. So they get it, which is a great theme, you know, like a weird, dark take. And then the next track is called Song of an Ant, which is just 43 seconds about an ant walking up a hill and dying. And it's this great bourgeois ennui, I guess, of working and working until you die, but also this great sort of outsider sense of life. I Wish I Had Fangs in a Tail is the very kind of goth side of this album. And it's cool because he's like wishing that he was a demon, but then some of my favorite lyrics that he has here. Like he wishes to be different. That's all the song's about. But he expresses this desire to be something else than what he is through comedy. I wish I could dig like the moles, have fur to survive the poles. I wish I had cash and a dashing mustache, then I could achieve my goals. That then leads into another great track. There's like 5 or 6 tracks on this album, which are absolutely stupendously amazing. And I'm glad that they're short. I'm glad that they don't fully develop into total songs, because that's how they exist. I also regret it a little bit. She Says Hello is a song about seeing somebody's ex and the complicated relationships that you feel, and about how she's crying. And it's this painfully true song. And just as you get into it, it ends. Evil Rhythm is kind of in line with that previous song that's sort of about dancing and the nature of sort of ironic anti-dancing song. And it's really a lot about rhythm and the perception of the blues and pop music being the devil's tool. I guess we could put that in the category of rebellious music as well, or blasphemous music, just pointing out the ridiculousness of an evil rhythm. Little Robot Girl that's just a They Might Be Giants song. I think it's about like a little girl who's dancing kind of in strange love. And then the album ends with I Wish I Were a Prostitute Again. And this is sort of a great encapsulation of the entire album. It's a joke title, right? Like if I told you that track number 47 on here was I Wish I Were a Prostitute Again, as opposed to I Sold Your Dog to a Chinese Restaurant. Jeez, why did I buy this? And now my dog's awake and he's trying to get fed. I'm not gonna sell you. That's just a weird old racist joke told by some dead guy, okay? If I told you that the song were called I Wish I Were a Prostitute Again, you might believe it. But this is a beautiful, strange love song. It goes through all these little details about, he paid me for my pee, he paid me for my poop, and dressed up in a bunny suit and all this weird stuff. But it hints at this concept of strange love and bourgeois ennui at the same time. Like he wishes for his life when he was a prostitute. Who knows if he was? Probably wasn't. But just like longing for a time of just being unestablished, unrooted, being in a bad situation and the freedom that comes from that. And on top of that, it's just very strange love, right? It's a strange gay prostitute song. So there you go. I'm now going to tell you my story about the high school that I didn't go to. So when I was in middle school, I went to this prep school called Belmont Hill. And it's basically like a school for hockey players and little Republican sadists. Like it's a very unpleasant place. I know, Toby. Do you want to come up here while I talk about this school? So Cambridge School, so the Belmont Hill was this just terrible, you had to wear a suit and tie. I let my hair grow out a little bit and everyone made fun of me and called me Muffin Head. It was terrible, right? And so I had to get out of this school, and my eldest brother went to that school for high school, to Belmont Hill, and he hated it. And then my brother, who was closest to me, went to this other school that was this like hippie wonderland. Like you could take classes on photography and art and poetry. And it was like filled with all these super creative hippy dippy kids, And my brother, who's kind of a weird guy, was like the king of the school. And it was like the coolest place. It was called the Cambridge School in Weston. That's the school that Stephen Merritt went to. And I used to visit there, and like all the kids treated, everyone, even though I was 6 years younger than my brother, everyone treated me cool, And so when I was trying to get out of that one prep school, the only place I got into was Cambridge School of Weston. So I could have continued with the little school for sadists, or this kind of hippie dreamland where my brother was king. This place where everybody was creative and wacky and pansexual, and I definitely would have, in my theory, I definitely would have had a girlfriend in high school if I went to that school, as opposed to the school I ended up going to. So, I had these two options before me, and I ended up just saying, screw it, I don't want to go to prep school, it's expensive, and I don't want to do it. So I went to the public school in that little town in Massachusetts, and that made all the determination in my life. But because I didn't go with the easy answer, like that basically is how I ended up living the rest of my life. So I could have studied art history instead of French. Art history comes easily to me. French is very difficult. I went with French. I would constantly come to these forks in a road, and I would go with a decision that's slightly more difficult. And that all started with Cambridge School of Weston. And when I think about that school, Stephen Merritt's music just snaps into place. When I think of him as like one of my brother's friends, they weren't there at the same time, near but not the same time, it all makes sense. Because the other thing about that school is that it's the most expensive prep school in Massachusetts. Sure, Belmont Hill is all for the, future jarheads and, not jarheads, but, like future investment bankers and fascists, and Cambridge School of Weston is this hippy-dippy place. But, like, you have to be super rich to get into that school. You have to be a sort of free spirit with a lot of money. And so I don't know. There's something about that environment. I don't know why I didn't go there. I really don't. It's a weird fact in my life, but I'm thankful to know it because it helps me to understand magnetic fields are Cambridge School of Western music. Okay. That said, I am now ready to go wake up my daughter for another day of school at home. Do your work. Do your work. I did do my work. Did you submit your work? Yes. Did you submit your work to the right place? No. Okay. Until next time, for Jonathan Richman, for, what is that guy's name? It's Seth something. Anyways, I actually feel kind of bad for supporting him. For Jonathan Richman and Toby, there's the camera.